It was done. The car was a flat pancake of metal, a twisted mess of what used to be a shiny red sports car. It sat there, a monument to my rage, a testament to how far a man can be pushed before he snaps. I watched the last of the mangled remains being loaded onto a flatbed, feeling nothing but a cold, hollow satisfaction. This wasn't just any car. This was his car. The car of the man who was sleeping with my wife. And it was parked in my spot. I had warned him. Not directly, of course. That would have been too easy, too sane. My warnings were subtle at first. A note on the windshield, private parking written in bold, permanent marker. He ignored it. Then a stronger note, towel away zone. Seriously, still he parked there. Every single day for 2 weeks. It was a taunt. A challenge. A blatant disregard for my space, my home, my life. He didn't just take my wife. He took my parking spot too. And that, in a weird way, felt even more personal, more humiliating. The first time I saw his car, the red one, a sleek, expensive-looking thing, pull into my spot, I felt a tremor of something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't anger yet. It was more like confusion, a slight irritation. My spot was clearly marked. It was right outside our condo building, the one I had paid a premium for, the one I used every single day after my long commute. I parked a block away and walked, fuming, but I didn't connect the dots then. Not yet. I just thought it was some random jerk. Then I saw him, walking out of my building, with my wife, Sarah. She was laughing, a light, carefree sound that used to make my heart sing. Now it just sounded alien, like a stranger's laugh. She had her arm linked through his, her head tilted up, looking at him with that soft, admiring gaze she used to reserve for me. My stomach dropped. The air went out of my lungs. It was like getting punched in the gut. A deep, sickening blow that left me gasping. He was tall, with dark hair and a confident smile. Kind of smile that made women swoon. The kind I knew Sarah had always been drawn to. He looked like the kind of guy who never had to worry about parking, or anything else for that matter. He looked like a guy who just took what he wanted. And he had taken a lot from me. I stood there, hidden by a row of bushes, watching them. They didn't see me. They were too wrapped up in their little world, their secret bubble of betrayal. They got into his car, the red one, the one in my spot, and drove away. My hands were shaking. My whole body felt cold, like ice water was pumping through my veins instead of blood. That was the first time. The first time the full, ugly truth smacked me in the face. It wasn't just a random jerk. It was the jerk. The one who had wormed his way into my life, into my home, into my marriage. And he had the audacity to park in my spot. It was like he was rubbing it in, an extra twist of the knife. I am here, the car seemed to scream. I am in your life, I am in your bed, and I am in your parking spot. The days that followed were a blur of numb existence. I went to work, I came home, I ate dinner, I watched television with Sarah. She was different. Her eyes held a new light I didn't recognize, a kind of guilty sparkle. She was more attentive sometimes, overly sweet, trying to compensate, I guess. Other times, she was irritable, snapping at me for small things. The guilt was eating at her. Or maybe it was just the excitement of a new affair. I couldn't tell. I just watched her, pretending everything was normal, while inside I was screaming. And his car, it was always there. A constant reminder, a red beacon of infidelity parked right outside my window. I tried talking to Sarah. "Is everything okay, honey?" I'd ask, my voice carefully neutral. "You seem a little preoccupied." She'd brush it off, say it was work or stress. She never looked me in the eye when she said it. The lies built a wall between us, thick and impenetrable. One morning, after a particularly sleepless night, I saw the car parked there again. It was early, the sun just coming up. The street was quiet. I walked out, my chest tight with a simmering rage. I pulled out a Sharpie from my pocket. It wasn't enough to put a note. I needed to mark it, to leave my own little message. I walked up to the driver's side door and hesitated for a second. My hand was shaking. This was a line. Once I crossed it, there was no going back. But I was already so far gone. My marriage was probably already beyond repair. What did I have to lose? With a deep breath, I started writing on the pristine red paint. Big block letters. Get out of my spot. It felt good. A small release of the pressure building inside me. I watched the black ink bleed into the clear coat. A dark stain on his perfect car. I felt a surge of satisfaction, petty and childish, but satisfying nonetheless. I went back inside, my heart thumping. I waited and I watched. He came out an hour later, whistling, looking happy. He saw the car and his face changed. The smile faded. He walked around it, touching the letters, his brow furrowed. He looked around, as if expecting me to jump out from behind a bush. I stayed hidden, watching him from the living room window. He sighed, got in his car and drove away. The next day, the car was gone. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he got the message. Maybe he realized what he was doing. Maybe he wouldn't come back. Maybe he would leave my wife alone. Maybe, just maybe, I could fix things. But hope, it turns out, is a cruel joke. 2 days later, the red car was back in my spot. And the "get out of my spot" message was gone, washed clean like it had never been there. He hadn't just cleaned it. He had sent a message back. I am not leaving. I am not going anywhere. He was saying, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when the idea formed. A cold, hard kernel of an idea. It started small, a whisper in the back of my mind. Then it grew, feeding on my anger, on my helplessness, on the growing chasm of betrayal that had swallowed my life. It wouldn't be a note this time. It wouldn't be a spray paint can. This time it would be permanent. This time he would regret ever parking his stupid red car in my spot. This time I would make sure he never ever forgot it. And that's exactly what I did. I had his car towed and crushed. No warnings, no second chances. Just gone. Flattened. A symbol of everything that was broken in my life, now broken by my own hand. And the silence it left behind was deafening. The silence of absolute destruction. Crushing of the car was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was the culmination of weeks, months even, of slow, agonizing realization. My life with Sarah had been good. or so I thought. We met in college, fell in love with that dizzying intensity of youth, and built a life together. A nice apartment, then this condo, 2 cats, a comfortable routine. We were the couple everyone looked up to, the one that seemed to have it all figured out. We laughed, we talked, we had dreams. Or I thought we did. Looking back, the cracks started subtly. Small things I dismissed at the time. Sarah started spending more time on her phone, always with a little smile on her face that wasn't for me. She'd take long calls in the other room, whispering. She'd get dressed up for work more often, wearing new clothes I hadn't seen before. She'd come home later, smelling faintly of a different cologne, not mine. I'd ask her about it and she'd just say, "Oh, it's probably just a co-worker. We were working late on a project." And I, foolish, trusting me, would believe her. Or at least I wanted to believe her. The first time I saw the red car, a sleek foreign model, I remember feeling a pang of envy. I'd always wanted a car like that. But our sensible budget, our plans for the future, had always dictated practical sedan. Must be nice, I remember thinking, as I walked past it, trying to find a street parking spot 2 blocks away because someone was in my reserved spot. That initial irritation was all I felt. No suspicion. Just a regular guy annoyed by a bad parker. Then came the second time and the third. It was always the same red car, always in my spot. It became a daily annoyance. I even complained to the condo association, but they said they couldn't do anything about reserved spots unless there was a direct confrontation. Just leave a note, they suggested. So I did, simple, polite. "This is a private reserved spot. Please do not park here." The note disappeared. The car stayed. My frustration simmered. It was more than just a parking spot. It was my routine, my small piece of order in a chaotic world. To have it disrupted daily felt like a personal affront. It chipped away at my patience, at my sense of security. I started to notice how often Sarah was out with friends, or at a work event, on the very nights the red car was parked in my spot for extended hours. I started to notice her phone going silent whenever I walked into the room. The paranoia started to set in, a slow, creeping dread. I'd wake up in the middle of the night feeling cold. I'd watch Sarah sleeping beside me, her face peaceful, and wonder if she was dreaming of someone else. The thought was like a physical pain, a wrenching in my gut. I tried to push it away. I tried to tell myself I was being crazy, jealous, insecure, but the evidence, small as it was, kept piling up. One evening I decided to work late from the office. I told Sarah I'd be home around midnight. Instead, I drove home at 9 p.m., parked a few streets away, and walked back to the condo. I stood across the street, hidden in the shadows, my heart pounding, and there it was. The red car, parked firmly in my spot. The lights were on in our living room. I saw shadows moving, 2 distinct shadows. One was Sarah's, unmistakable, the other taller, broader. My blood ran cold. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching the shadows dance in my living room, in my home. I didn't go in. I just stood there, letting the reality wash over me. A tidal wave of betrayal. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. It was happening. Right there in my home, while I was out working, earning money to pay for that very home. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. I drove aimlessly for hours. The image of the 2 shadows burned into my mind. I called my best friend Mark, but I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud. "Everything okay, man?" he asked, hearing the tremor in my voice. "Just work stress," I mumbled, hating myself for lying. Hating myself for lying, hating myself for not being able to articulate the monumental pain I was feeling. I ended up driving to an all-night diner, sitting in a booth, staring at my lukewarm coffee, the sounds of the bustling kitchen a distant buzz. My mind replayed every moment, every suspicious glance, every whispered phone call. It all made sense now. The new clothes, the late nights, the distant smiles, the new cologne. It wasn't just a coworker. It was him, the man in the red car. I went home just before dawn. Sarah was asleep in our bed, curled up on her side. I slipped in beside her, careful not to wake her. The bed felt cold, empty despite her presence. I stared at the ceiling, the betrayal a heavy weight on my chest. I knew then that my life, as I knew it, was over. The next morning, I woke up feeling a strange calm. It wasn't peace. It was the calm of absolute devastation, the kind where you've hit rock bottom and here is nowhere left to fall. The red car was still in my spot. It felt like an intentional slap in the face. A declaration. I own this now, your wife, your home, your spot. It's all mine. That's when the anger, which had been a dull ache, sharpened into a precise cutting tool. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was a fierce, burning rage. He wasn't just stealing my wife. He was flaunting it. He was invading my physical space. And the car, that sleek, expensive symbol of his arrogance, was the perfect target. It was a tangible representation of everything he had taken. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions. I researched towing companies. Not just any towing company. I needed one that was aggressive, no questions asked. I found one that specialized in nuisance vehicle removal. I made a few calls, explained the situation, vaguely, unauthorized vehicle on private property, repeat offender. They gave me prices. They mentioned crushing. My heart did not flinch. In fact, it solidified. This was it. This was the answer. I watched him. I learned his schedule. He would usually come over late in the afternoon, after I was at work. He'd leave late in the evening, sometimes after I was supposedly asleep. Sometimes he'd stay the night, leaving early in the morning, right before I left for work. Car would stay in my spot, a constant, glowing red reminder of his presence. The plan formed, cold and precise. It would have to be when he stayed overnight, when the car was there, immobile for a long stretch. When I was supposedly out of the house, I picked a day. A Friday. He always stayed over on Fridays. I told Sarah I had an early meeting, needed to leave before dawn. I kissed her goodbye, a kiss that felt like ash in my mouth. She mumbled something, half asleep. I drove a few blocks, parked, and waited. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples. I watched the building, and then I saw him. Walking out, keys in hand, heading for the red car. He looked tired but satisfied. He got in, started the engine, and drove away. My heart sank. My plan ruined. He hadn't stayed. He must have left earlier. I felt a surge of disappointment. Then the anger returned, hotter than ever. He was elusive. He was careful. But I was patient. I was determined. I would wait, and I would make him pay. This was not just about the affair anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity, my home, my peace of mind. And that damn red car was going to be the first casualty in my war. My patience was finite, and it was quickly running out. After the failed attempt, a new kind of dread settled in. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the feeling of being hunted, of being a ghost in my own home. I started living a double life. By day, I was the clueless husband, going to work trying to make small talk with Sarah, pretending everything was normal. By night, I was a silent observer, a detective in my own life, gathering evidence, building a case against the man who had stolen my wife and my parking spot. The red car became my obsession. Every time I saw it parked in my spot, my heart would pound with a mix of fury and a strange, cold resolve. It was a dare, a monument to his arrogance. He wasn't just having an affair, he was rubbing it in my face. It was as if he was saying, "I am here, I am taking what's yours, and you can't do anything about it." I started keeping a log, dates and times the red car appeared, how long it stayed. I used my phone to snap pictures not of Sarah and him but of the car. Time-stamped, location tagged, evidence. Not for a court but for myself, to justify what I was planning. To convince myself I wasn't going crazy. Sarah's behavior became even more erratic. Some days she was overly affectionate, almost clinging, as if trying to soothe a guilty conscience. She'd suggest we watch a movie together or cook a meal. I'd play along, forcing a smile, but inside I was a storm of resentment. Other days she was distant, lost in her own thoughts, easily irritated. She'd snap at me for leaving a sock on the floor, or for asking too many questions about her day. It was like living with a stranger, a beautiful stranger who had once been my world. I tried one last time to get her to confess. One evening after she'd come home late, looking flushed and happy, I sat her down on the couch. "Sarah," I started, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "We need to talk." She tensed. Her eyes darted away. "What about?" she asked, her voice too casual. "About us," I said, looking directly into her eyes. "About what's been happening." She still wouldn't meet my gaze. "Nothing's happening, John. I am just tired." "Are you happy, Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Are you happy with our life?" She finally looked at me, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, regret. But it was quickly replaced by a defensive hardness. "Of course I am happy," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Why wouldn't I be?" "'Cause you are not here," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "You are not really here with me," her jaw tightened. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," I paused, taking a deep breath, "it means I feel like you are pulling away. Like to here is someone else." The air in the room grew thick. Sarah's face went pale. For a second, I thought she might confess. I hoped she would. I hoped she would break down, tell me everything. And maybe, just maybe, we could start to pick up the pieces. But she didn't. Instead, her eyes hardened. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. "How dare you accuse me of something like that? After everything we've been through? Are you crazy?" She stormed out of the room, leaving me alone on the couch. Stunned, the accusation had turned on me. I was the bad guy. I was the one who was crazy. My last attempt at communication had failed. Spectacularly. The wall between us was now a fortress. After that confrontation, I stopped trying to talk about us. I stopped asking questions. I just observed, and I planned. My anger settled into a cold, hard resolve. If she wouldn't acknowledge it, if she wouldn't stop, then I would make a statement she couldn't ignore. And that statement would be made with his car. The car was more than just a car to me now. It was a symbol of his invasion, his arrogance, his destruction of my life. It was a standing taunt, and I wanted to wipe that taunt off the face of the earth. I started researching towing laws, private property, unauthorized vehicles. I learned that if a car is parked on private property without permission, the owner of that property has the right to have it towed. And if the car isn't claimed within a certain amount of time, it can be sold for salvage. Or in some cases, if the value is low enough or the fees accumulate, crushed. The word crushed resonated deep within me. It wasn't just about removing it. It was about obliterating it. Making it cease to exist. I found a towing company outside of the city, a family-owned business with a yard full of wrecked cars. I called them, explained my situation again vaguely. Repeat offender on my reserved parking spot. The owner, a gruff but sympathetic man named Frank, listened patiently. Son, I've seen it all. People do some crazy things over parking spots. Especially when here is more to it than just parking. He didn't ask what more to it meant. He just understood. He quoted me a price for the tow. He also mentioned, almost casually, if you want it gone for good, we can arrange for it to be scrapped after the legal hold period. Sometimes if they don't pick it up, it's easier to just crush it. My heart leaped. Crush it. I repeated the word, tasting sweet on my tongue. Yes, I want it crushed. Frank paused. That's a pretty strong statement, son. You sure about that? Positive, I said, my voice firm. Absolutely positive. We made a plan. I would call him when the car was there, when I knew it would be there for a while. He would send a truck. It would be quick, discreet. He just needed the address and a signed form stating I was the property owner and the car was unauthorized. I waited. Days turned into weeks. The red car came and went. Sometimes it was just for a few hours. Sometimes it stayed overnight. I needed a clear window, a long window. I didn't want him to have a chance to get it back. I wanted it gone before he even knew it was gone. One Thursday evening, Sarah told me she was going to a girls' night out sleepover at her friend Lisa's house. Lisa lived an hour away. Sarah would be gone all night. She'd be back late Saturday morning. This was it. The perfect opportunity. I watched her leave, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. See you Saturday, honey, she said. I nodded, a knot of ice in my stomach. I knew what this girl's night out meant. It meant he was coming over. It meant the red car would be in my spot all night. A few hours later, just as dusk was settling, I saw it. The red car, gliding into my spot. The driver got out. It was him. The confident stride, the way he tossed his keys in his hand. He glanced up at our window and I instinctively ducked back. He went inside. I waited until I was sure he was settled. Then I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for Frank, the tow truck guy. My heart was pounding, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. This was it. The point of no return. My life would never be the same after this. But then again, it was already unrecognizable. The man I was, the life I had, it was already shattered. What more did I have to lose? With a deep breath, I pressed call. The phone rang twice before Frank's gruff voice answered. Yeah? It's John, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. The car is here. The red one. It's in my spot, and it's going to be there all night. There was a moment of silence on the other end. Then Frank said, all right, John, we'll be there in 20 minutes. Have that form ready. It's ready, I said. And Frank, remember what I said. I want it gone permanently. Understood, he said. The line clicked dead. I put the phone down, my hand shaking slightly. I walked to the window and stared at the red car. Its sleek lines, its expensive paint, its arrogant presence. It was the last time I would ever see it like this. My heart was breaking, but it was also hardening. This wasn't just an act of vengeance. It was an act of self-preservation. It was the only way I knew how to fight back against the ghost that had invaded my home and stolen my life. And I was ready to see it reduced to dust. The 20 minutes felt like an eternity. I stood at the living room window, a cup of cold coffee in my hand, staring at the red car. Every fiber of my being was buzzing with a mixture of anticipation and dread. My mind replayed the last few months. The slow erosion of my marriage, the creeping suspicion, the agonizing confirmation. Each memory was a chisel, carving away at the man I used to be, shaping me into this cold, calculating individual who was about to destroy another man's property. He was still in there, in my home, with my wife. The thought was a raw wound, constantly bleeding. I imagined them laughing, touching, oblivious to the storm brewing outside, to the mechanical beast on its way to devour his cherished possession. A dark satisfaction curled in my chest. He would know. He would feel it. He would understand what it felt like to have something precious taken away, irrevocably. A flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Was this too extreme? Would I regret it? What would the consequences be? Legal repercussions? A deeper, more bitter fight with Sarah. My conscience, a tiny, almost extinguished spark, tried to make itself heard. But the wave of betrayal and humiliation that had been building for months crashed over it, drowning it out. This was necessary. This was the only way I knew how to regain some shred of control, some sliver of dignity. He had pushed me too far. Then the low rumble of a diesel engine pierced the quiet night. My head snapped up. A large flatbed tow truck, illuminated by the streetlights, slowly turned a corner and headed down our street. It was a beast of a machine, powerful and imposing. Just what I needed. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. I walked quickly to the front door, the signed authorization form clutched in my hand. I opened the door just as the tow truck pulled up beside the red car, its engine idling. The sound was surprisingly loud in the stillness of the night. Frank, the tow truck driver, was a burly man with a weathered face and a kind but tired gaze. He hopped out of the cab, his heavy boots thudding on the pavement. "Evening, John," he said, his voice low. He didn't look at the condo building. He didn't ask questions. He was all business. "Evening, Frank," I replied, handing him the form. My voice was a little hoarse. Took the clipboard, scanned the document quickly, and then nodded. "All right, let's get this done." He walked to the back of the truck, the chains jingling as he lowered the ramp. The hydraulic system hissed softly. He moved with practiced efficiency, hooking up the front wheels of the red car. Car was low to the ground, sleek, and it looked almost delicate next to the heavy machinery. It was beautiful, I had to admit, in a cold, clinical way. And now it was about to become scrap. I watched, mesmerized, as the chains tightened. The red car gave a slight shudder as it was lifted, slowly, off the ground. The tires spun uselessly in the air. It looked vulnerable, helpless. Part of me, a tiny buried part, almost felt a pang of something akin to pity, but it was quickly overshadowed by the searing memory of Sarah's laughter. With him, the image of his car in my spot, a daily mockery. As the car was being winched onto the flatbed, I heard a sound, a muffled shout from inside the condo building. My blood ran cold. Had he heard? Was he coming out? My eyes darted to our window. It was dark, no movement. It must have been something else. My heart continued its frantic rhythm. Frank secured the car, the chains clanking loudly. He checked everything twice, making sure it was stable. Then he came back to me. "All right, John, it's done. You'll get a call when it's at the yard. You know the drill from there." "Thank you, Frank," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I handed him a wad of cash. The prepayment for the tow and the initial storage. Crushing would come later, once the legal waiting period was over. But in my mind, it was already crushed. It was already gone. Frank nodded, took the money and then paused, looking at me. His expression was unreadable. "You know, John," he said, his voice soft, "sometimes getting rid of the problem doesn't solve what's underneath." I met his gaze. He understood. He knew this wasn't just about a car or a parking spot. He knew this was about a broken heart, a shattered life. "I know, Frank," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "but it's a start." He nodded again, a slow, solemn nod. He climbed back into the cab. The engine roared to life, louder now. Truck slowly pulled away, the red car riding silently on its back, heading towards its inevitable end. I watched until it turned the corner, disappearing from sight. The street was empty now. My parking spot was gloriously, defiantly empty. A profound silence descended, the kind of silence that feels heavy, suffocating. The red car was gone, but the emptiness it left behind was vast. It was the emptiness of my life, of my marriage. I stood there for a long time, just breathing in the quiet, empty air. The deed was done. The immediate cause of my daily torment was removed. But the source of the pain, the betrayal, was still inside. With my wife, I went back inside, the condo feeling colder, emptier than ever. I didn't turn on any lights. I just sat in the dark living room staring at the empty parking spot outside. It was a victory of sorts, a small, desperate act of defiance. But it felt hollow. There was no joy, no triumph. Just a cold, hard sense of inevitability. I knew the morning would bring chaos. It would bring the storm I had been bracing for. The moment he realized his car was gone. The moment Sarah found out. I knew it would be ugly. For now, in the quiet darkness, there was only the silence. The silence of a battle won, but a war still raging. The silence of a heart-breaking piece by agonizing piece. The silence of a man who had finally snapped, and now had to face the ruins of his life. And I was ready. Or so I told myself. Predator had shown his patience, and now his strike had landed. The waiting was over. The true nightmare was about to begin. The alarm on my phone went off, a gentle, insistent vibration against my pillow. I reached for it, my hand stiff. I had barely slept, maybe an hour or two, snatched in the pre-dawn quiet. My eyes felt gritty, my head heavy. But despite the exhaustion, a strange alertness buzzed beneath my skin. Today was the day, the reckoning. I got out of bed, moving slowly, carefully, so as not to wake Sarah. She was still asleep, curled on her side, her breathing even and soft. Looking at her, a wave of complex emotions washed over me. Tenderness, longing, and a bitter, burning anger. How could she sleep so peacefully, knowing what she had done, knowing what she's coming? Or perhaps she didn't know. Perhaps she still thought she was in control, that her secret was safe. She was about to find out how wrong she was. I went into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my face pale. There were dark circles under my eyes. I looked like a stranger. The man staring back at me was hardened, older, consumed by something dark and relentless. The innocent, happy man I once was felt like a distant memory, a ghost from another life. I dressed quietly, picking out a plain shirt and jeans. No need for work clothes today. I wouldn't be going to the office. Not after this. This was going to consume everything. I made myself a cup of coffee, the aroma filling the quiet kitchen. I sat at the counter, staring out the window at my empty parking spot. It was still empty, gloriously, defiantly empty. Concrete patch of ground looked innocent, as if it had never hosted a monument to my wife's betrayal. The sight filled me with a perverse sense of satisfaction. It was gone, really gone. Then the front door of our condo building opened. It was him, the lover. He stepped out, looking rumpled, perhaps a little tired from a night of clandestine activities. He stretched, yawned, and then started walking towards where his car should have been. He was whistling a jaunty tune. His eyes, still a little unfocused from sleep, landed on the empty spot. His whistle died in his throat. He stopped dead, his brow furrowed in confusion. He looked left, then right, as if the car might have magically moved itself. Then he took a few steps forward, his pace quickening, his head swiveling, scanning the street. The jaunty confidence, that annoying swagger, was gone, replaced by bewilderment, then a dawning panic. He pulled out his phone, already pressing numbers, bringing it to his ear. Paced in front of the empty spot, his words growing louder, more frantic. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could imagine. Where is it? My car. It's gone. Did you tow it? What are you talking about? Private property. The corner of my mouth twitched, a small grim smile. He was finally feeling it, the discomfort, the panic, the loss of control. It was a fraction of what I had felt for months, but it was a start. He ended the call, looking utterly distraught. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing in tight circles. He looked around wildly, as if expecting the car to reappear from thin air. He must have called the police or a towing company. I knew what they would tell him. Unauthorized belief. Nothing they could do. It was legally towed. My signed form protected me. After what felt like an eternity of him pacing and fuming, he went back into the building. My heart began to pound harder. This was it. The confrontation. A few minutes later, I heard the furious pounding on our door. Not a knock, a pounding. Boom, boom, boom. I didn't move. I just waited. The pounding continued, getting louder, more insistent. Then, Sarah's voice muffled through the door. Who is it? What's going on? The door burst open. It wasn't the lover. It was Sarah. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She saw me sitting at the counter, calmly sipping my coffee. Her gaze darted to the empty parking spot visible through the window. Then back to me. John, she whispered, her voice barely audible. His car, it's gone. I just looked at her, my face expressionless. Did you see anything? She asked, her voice rising in panic. Did someone steal it? He's freaking out. I took another slow sip of my coffee. I put the mug down deliberately. No, I said, my voice calm, almost unnaturally so. It wasn't stolen. Her eyes narrowed. A flicker of realization, of dread, crossed her face. What are you talking about? I had it towed, I said. My voice was still calm, but it held a steel edge she had never heard before. It was parked in my spot, repeatedly. I warned him. Her jaw dropped. You? What? She shrieked, her voice cracking. You towed Michael's car? Are you insane? It was in my spot, I repeated, my gaze unwavering. My reserved parking spot. It was unauthorized. I had every right. But it's Michael, she cried, her voice filled with anguish. You can't just tow Michael's car. Michael, I said, the name tasting like ash on my tongue. So that's his name, Michael, the man who's been sleeping with my wife. The man who has been parking his fancy red car in my spot. Every single day flaunting his presence, mocking me, invading my home, taking my life apart piece by piece. Her face went from pale to ghostly white. Her mouth opened and closed. She took a step back, as if I had struck her. You know, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Oh, I know, I said, standing up. My voice was rising now, filled with all the pent-up rage and pain. I know everything, Sarah. I know about the late nights, the whispered phone calls, the work meetings, the new clothes. I know about the hours you've spent with him in this very apartment in our bed, while I was out working, paying for this life you so easily threw away. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no pity. Only a cold burning emptiness. How long? She whispered. Long enough, I said. Long enough for you to destroy everything, and long enough for me to decide I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. You broke my heart, Sarah. But he took my parking spot. And that was the final straw, a loud pounding on the door again. More insistent this time. Sarah, what's going on? Here is my car. Michael's voice, frantic and enraged. Sarah looked. From me to the door, her face a mask of horror. She was trapped. Her two worlds colliding in a spectacular, painful explosion. He's still here? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He spent the night again? After everything. I walked past her, my eyes fixed on the door. She reached out, a desperate hand on my arm. John, no, please. I shrugged her off. I opened the door. Michael stood there, his face red with fury and panic. His eyes, though, were still a little unfocused from sleep. He looked at me, then at Sarah, then back at me. Recognition dawned in his eyes, slowly, agonizingly. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving horror. You, he said, his voice a low growl. You did this. You towed my car. Yes, I did, I said, meeting his gaze squarely. And that's not all I did, Michael. Your car isn't just towed. It's on its way to the junkyard. It's going to be crushed. His eyes widened in shock. Sarah gasped behind me. The silence that followed was deafening. Only sound was the frantic pounding of my own heart, and the echoes of a life shattering right there in the morning light. The morning after had arrived, and it was uglier than I could have ever imagined. But somehow, in that moment, seeing the look on his face, I felt a grim kind of peace. The silence in the hallway was thick, heavy, broken only by Sarah's choked gasp behind me. Michael's face, moments ago, contorted in anger and confusion, was now a mask of pure disbelief. He opened his mouth, then closed it, struggling to find words. Crushed? He finally managed, his voice barely a whisper, as if testing the word on his tongue. You crushed my car. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm very serious, Michael, I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor in my hands. It was illegally parked on my property repeatedly. I gave fair warning. You chose to ignore it. Now you pay the price. I didn't mention the written note or the verbal warnings I didn't give. He knew what fair warning meant. It meant I knew. He took a step forward, his eyes blazing. You lunatic, that's property damage. That's illegal. I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You'll sue me? I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. For what? For protecting my property. For stopping you from flaunting your affair in my face. For getting rid of the constant reminder of your disrespect, your arrogance, your utter disregard for my home, my life, my marriage. Sarah stepped forward, finally finding her voice. John, stop, please. You are making it worse. I turned to her, my gaze cold. Worse, Sarah. How could it be worse? You've already destroyed everything. To here is nothing left to make worse. Michael looked from me to Sarah, a flicker of understanding, then resentment crossing his features. You told him? Sarah flinched, looking away. No, I didn't tell him. He just knows. I know more than you think. I said, looking back at Michael. I know you've been spending nights here. I know you've been taking my wife, and I know your precious car. The symbol of your conquest is now a block of scrap metal. His face contorted in rage. He lunged forward. You bastard. I braced myself, but before he could reach me, Sarah screamed and threw herself between us, pushing Michael back. No, stop it! Both of you! Michael stumbled back, momentarily thrown off. He glared at me, his chest heaving. This isn't over, John. Not by a long shot. You'll regret this. I promise you, you'll regret this. He turned to Sarah, his face softening slightly, though still full of anger. Sarah, come on, let's go. We can deal with this later. Sarah stood frozen, looking between us, tears streaming down her face. She was caught, exposed, her life unraveling before her eyes. I can't, she whispered, her voice trembling. Not right now. Michael's eyes narrowed. He looked at me again, a look of pure hatred. Then, without another word, he spun on his heel and stormed out of the building. His heavy footsteps echoed down the hall as he disappeared. The silence that descended after he left was even heavier than before. It was the silence of a bomb having just exploded. Sarah slowly turned to face me, her eyes red, her face streaked with tears. How could you? She choked out, her voice raw with accusation. How could you do something so cruel, so vindictive? Cruel, I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. Vindictive? You are asking me that? After you've systematically dismantled our life, cheated on me in our own home, with a man who so arrogantly parked his car in my spot every single day, you ask me how I could be cruel. It was a mistake, she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. A terrible mistake. A mistake you made over and over again for months, I said, my voice rising. A mistake that included countless lies, sneaking around, betraying every vow we ever made. A mistake that you brought into our bed, into our home. And then you have the audacity to say it's a mistake, and that I am cruel for reacting to it. She dropped her hands, her eyes blazing with a mixture of pain and anger. You think you are so righteous? You think you are so perfect? You were always so distant, so focused on work. I felt neglected, lonely. He paid attention to me. My heart twisted. So this is my fault? My fault that you cheated. My fault that you choose to lie and sneak around instead of talking to me. My fault that you didn't just leave if you were unhappy. I didn't want to leave, she cried. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. It just happened. Just happened doesn't explain months of an affair, I said, shaking my head. The raw pain was finally breaking through the anger. You just happened to keep lying to me. You just happened to keep sneaking around. You just happened to let him park his car here every day, knowing it was my spot, knowing I had to walk blocks just to find parking. You just happened to allow him to rub your affair in my face, day after day with that stupid red car. The anger was back, sharp and cutting. That car was the symbol of his invasion. It was a constant reminder of what you were doing. And you let it happen. You let him do it. You endorsed it. So I took it away. I crushed it. And I have no regrets about that. She stared at me, her face utterly defeated. Tears were flowing freely now, carving paths down her cheeks. What now, John? She whispered, her voice broken. What do we do? I looked around our living room, the room where we had shared so many memories, so much laughter. The room where she had betrayed me. It felt tainted, irrevocably damaged. There is no we anymore, Sarah, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Here is just me and you, and whatever life you choose to build with Michael, or whoever else you decide to betray next. I walked to the closet and pulled out a duffel bag. I started throwing clothes into it. Jeans, t-shirts, a few changes of underwear. She watched me, her eyes wide with shock. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I am leaving," I said, not looking at her. "I can't stay here. Not anymore, not after this." "But this is your home," she cried. "Our home. You can't just leave." "It stopped being my home the moment you invited him into it," I retorted, my voice cold. "It stopped being our home the moment you broke our vows. You made your choice, Sarah. Now you live with the consequences." I zipped up the duffel bag. It wasn't much, just enough for a few days. I would come back later, when she wasn't here, to pack the rest, to sort through the wreckage of our life. I walked past her, towards the front door. She reached out, grasping my arm again. "John, please, don't do this. Let's talk. We can fix this. We can get through this." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Tea here is nothing to fix, Sarah. It's broken. And some things, once shattered, can never be truly put back together." I opened the door and walked out, leaving her standing alone in the living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our past and the crushing reality of our shattered present. The last thing I heard as I pulled the door shut was her heartbroken sob, a sound that would haunt me for a long time. But in that moment, I just kept walking. The unraveling had begun, and it was brutal. I drove to Mark's place, my best friend. I hadn't called him. I knew he'd be home. He was always an early riser. The drive was a blur, my mind racing, replaying the last hour, the last months, the last years. Each mile was another layer of distance from the wreckage I'd left behind. I parked outside his apartment building, the silence of my car's interior, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. I sat there for a few minutes, just breathing, trying to calm the frantic pounding of my heart. What would I tell him? How do you tell your best friend that your wife cheated on you, that you knew about it, and that you retaliated by having her lover's car crushed? It sounded insane, even to me, but Mark was Mark. He'd always been there for me. Through college, through breakups, through the joys of my wedding day, he was the only one I could turn to. I got out of the car, pulled my duffel bag from the back seat, and walked to his door. I knocked, a tentative, almost desperate knock. A few moments later, the door opened. Mark stood there, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a half-eaten piece of toast in his hand. He took one look at my face, at the duffel bag, and his brow furrowed. "John, what the hell happened? You look like you just fought a bear." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside immediately, his eyes filled with concern. "Of course, man. Come on in. What's going on?" I walked into his living room, dropped my bag on the floor, and sank onto his couch. The familiar comfort of his space, the smell of coffee and toast, was almost overwhelming. It was a stark reminder of the normalcy I had just abandoned. "It's Sarah," I started, my voice hoarse. She's been having an affair." Mark's eyes widened. He sat down opposite me, putting his toast carefully on a coaster. "What? Are you serious?" I nodded, feeling the hot sting of tears behind my eyes. "Yeah, serious. And it's been going on for months, with some guy named Michael." I told him everything. The subtle changes in Sarah, the late nights, the whispers, the red car in my parking spot. I told him about my growing suspicion, about watching them from the shadows, about the sickening realization. I told him about trying to talk to her, about her denial and accusations. And then I told him about the car. The decision to tow it, to crush it, the call to Frank, the quiet execution in the dead of night, the morning's confrontation with Michael, and then with Sarah. The explosion of raw, ugly truth. My decision to leave. Mark listened in silence, his face a mix of shock, anger, and pity. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, the story hanging heavy in the air between us, he just sat there for a moment, absorbing it all. Finally he spoke, his voice low and sympathetic. "John, man, I am so sorry. That's brutal." He ran a hand through his hair. "And the car? You really crushed his car?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of defiance and exhaustion. "Gone. A block of scrap metal now. I told them to make sure of it." Mark let out a slow whistle. "Wow, that's a statement, dude. A hell of a statement." He paused. "Are you okay?" "No," I said, the word a painful "rah." "No, I am not okay, Mark. I feel like my entire life just imploded. Like someone took a wrecking ball to everything I thought was real. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know what to do." "You did what you felt you had to do," Mark said, his voice firm. "He deserved it. He was parking in your spot, man. That's just insulting. It's like he was taunting you. And Sarah, I love Sarah, but she completely betrayed you. You didn't deserve any of this." His words, simple and direct, were a balm to my raw nerves. I felt a knot in my chest loosen slightly. He wasn't judging me. He understood. "I just kept seeing that car," I confessed, my voice cracking. "Every time I looked out the window, it was like a giant middle finger right there in my face. And I couldn't do anything about it. I felt so helpless, so powerless." "You weren't powerless, man," Mark said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You showed them. You took your power back. It was extreme, sure, but I get it. I totally get it." We talked for hours. Told him about my fears, about the legal repercussions Michael threatened, about the crushing pain of seeing Sarah with another man. Mark listened, offered advice where he could, but mostly he just listened. He made me feel less alone, less insane. He offered me his spare room for as long as I needed it. "Consider it home, man," he said. "You're a family, and we'll figure this out together." The quiet after the storm was unsettling. The initial explosion with Sarah and Michael had been intense, but now there was just a dull ache. My phone, which I had silenced, remained silent. No calls from Sarah, no threats from Michael. It was the quiet of a severed connection. I spent the next few days in a haze. I went to work, but my mind wasn't there. My boss, a kind woman named Helen, noticed. "Everything okay, John?" she asked. "You seem a bit distracted." "Just some personal stuff," I mumbled. I couldn't bring myself to tell her. "Not yet." I called a divorce lawyer. The consultation was clinical, cold. He talked about assets, custody. We had no kids. Separation agreements, legal fees. It was all so impersonal, so technical, for something that felt so deeply personal, so utterly heartbreaking. The lawyer asked me about the car. "Any significant assets or debts related to the other party's new partner?" he asked. I hesitated. "Well, I did have his car towed and crushed." The lawyer paused, his pen frozen over his notepad. He looked at me, a long, assessing look. "Crushed, Mr. Miller? As in, completely destroyed?" "Yes," I said, a strange sense of defiance returning. "It was illegally parked on my private property. I have the documentation from the tow company. It's within my rights after a certain period of time, if the vehicle is unclaimed." He leaned back in his chair. "Technically, yes. If proper procedure was followed and a demand for its return was ignored." "But Mr. Miller, in a divorce proceeding, especially one involving infidelity, an act of intentional destruction of the other party's lover's property could be seen unfavorably. It might be interpreted as an act of extreme vindictiveness, which could affect the settlement or even lead to a civil suit against you. My heart sank. So he can sue me. He could try, the lawyer said, tapping his pen, proving damages beyond what was owed for the tow and storage, and proving direct intent to harm that would outweigh your right to enforce parking rules on private property. Would be complicated, especially if he was parking there repeatedly and ignoring warnings. It's a messy situation, Mr. Miller, but rest assured, we'll handle it. The call ended, leaving me with a new layer of dread. The immediate emotional pain of the betrayal was giving way to the cold, hard realities of legal and financial repercussions. The quiet aftermath wasn't quiet at all. It was filled with the echoing thud of approaching lawsuits, the rustling of legal papers, and the lingering, suffocating silence of a life that was well and truly broken. I had wanted control and, in a way, I had gotten it. But the price was proving to be higher than I ever imagined. The heartbreak was just beginning its slow, insidious work. The initial shock of the confrontation faded, replaced by a dull, persistent ache in my chest. Living at Mark's place was a comfort, but also a constant reminder of how much my life had changed. Every morning I woke up in a strange bed, in a quiet room that wasn't mine. Every evening I came back to a place that felt temporary, not home. The quiet from Sarah and Michael was unnerving. I expected furious phone calls, threats, more confrontations. But there was nothing. It was as if they had both vanished into thin air. The silence was a heavy blanket, suffocating me, making me wonder if the whole thing had been a dream, a nightmare. Then the first letter arrived. It wasn't from Michael directly, but from his lawyer. A cease and desist letter, demanding the immediate return of his illegally seized and destroyed vehicle along with compensation for its market value, damages and emotional distress. It was boilerplate, aggressive, and exactly what my lawyer had predicted. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who assured me he would handle it. "Standard procedure, John," he said, his voice calm. "We'll send a counter notice. Stand your ground. You followed the letter of the law regarding private property." He was warned. He ignored it. Despite his reassurances, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Legal battles were expensive, draining, and public. This was exactly what I had wanted to avoid, yet here I was, knee-deep in it. Price of vengeance, it seemed, was not just emotional, but financial as well. The silence from Sarah, however, was the most painful. Days turned into a week, then 2. She didn't call, she didn't text. It was as if I had ceased to exist. I tried to convince myself that this was good, that it meant she was finally leaving me alone to pick up the pieces. But deep down, a part of me, the part that still loved her, despite everything, ached for some sign, some word, some indication that she wasn't completely gone. I knew she was still in the condo. Mark drove past it once and told me he saw her car parked there. Her lights were on at night. She was still living in our home, the home we had built together. But she wasn't reaching out. One evening, unable to bear the silence anymore, I broke. I drove to the condo, parked a few streets away, and walked up to the building. The street was dark and quiet. I looked up at our window. The lights were on. I saw her shadow move across the living room. She was there, alone. Or so I hoped. I debated for a long time whether to go up, to knock on the door, to demand answers, to plead for some kind of closure. But what would I say? What was left to say? The chasm between us was too wide, too deep. The bridge had been burned, not just by her actions, but by mine. I walked around the building slowly, and then I saw it. The empty parking spot, my parking spot, still empty. Still a monument to my rage, but now also a monument to my loneliness. The satisfaction I had felt when the tow truck drove away was gone, replaced by a profound sense of emptiness. The car was gone, but so was my wife, so was my home, so was the life I had known. Was it worth it? Was that moment of vindication, of watching his precious car disappear, worth the complete destruction of my world? I didn't know anymore. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Sarah. My heart leaped into my throat. I stared at the screen, 1,000 emotions warring inside me. Hope, fear, anger, longing. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and answered. "Hello?" My voice was clipped, wary. I got a letter from Michael's lawyer. He's suing you. I know, I repeated. My lawyer is handling it. He's serious, John. He wants his car. He wants money. He said he's going to make your life a living hell. He already did that, I retorted, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. He helped you make my life a living hell. With you, and with that car parked in my spot, day after day. So, frankly, I am not particularly worried about his threats. Another silence. I wanted you to know, she said, her voice small. And I wanted to ask about the house. What are we doing about the house? My lawyer will be in touch with your lawyer about the house, I said. And everything else. It's called a divorce, Sarah. We're getting one. Her breath hitched. Divorce, she whispered, the word a raw wound. John, please. Can't we just talk about everything? Not through lawyers, just us. There is no us anymore, Sarah, I said, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. You made sure of that. You shattered us into 1,000,000 pieces. And the only thing I could think to do was shatter something of his in return. So, he knows how it feels. But it's not the same, she pleaded, her voice breaking. A car isn't a life. A car isn't a marriage. No, I agreed, my voice flat. It's not, but it was his, and it was a symbol. A symbol of everything you two did to me, and now it's gone, just like us. Another silence stretched between us. I could hear her quiet sobs on the other end of the line. I felt a flicker of the old tenderness, the old pain, but I pushed it down. I couldn't afford it. Not now. I am sorry, John, she finally managed, the words barely audible. I am so sorry for everything. Sorry doesn't fix it, Sarah, I said. Sorry doesn't unbreak a heart. Sorry doesn't uncrush a car. Sorry doesn't unshatter a life. I knew I sounded harsh, cruel perhaps, but I couldn't help it. The pain was too deep, the betrayal too profound. I have to go, I said, my voice cold. My lawyer will be in touch. I hung up, my hand shaking as I put the phone down. Call had left me feeling drained, empty, but also resolute. The quiet had been broken, but nothing had been fixed. Conversation had only served to reinforce the chasm between us. The price of vengeance was indeed high, not just in legal fees and potential lawsuits, but in the utter, complete destruction of any hope for reconciliation, for healing. The quiet aftermath was anything but peaceful. It was the sound of my heart slowly, irrevocably, breaking again and again. Months turned into a year. The legal battle with Michael finally reached a resolution. It wasn't a victory, not really. It was a weary truce. My lawyer successfully argued that I had acted within my rights as a property owner. Michael's claims of emotional distress and malicious intent were largely dismissed. But the judge ruled that I should reimburse him for a portion of the car's value, effectively settling the matter. It was a compromise, a financial hit, but it meant no more court dates, no more endless paperwork. The price was steep, but the peace of mind was worth it. He didn't get a new car, and I didn't get ruined, just a shared, bitter defeat. The divorce from Sarah also went through. It was finalized quietly, without fanfare, through our lawyers. We didn't see each other again after that last painful conversation. The condo was sold, the profits split. It was all so clean on paper, so orderly. But in reality, it felt like my heart had been torn in two, and then carefully stitched back together with barbed wire. I moved into my own small apartment. It was nothing like the condo, nothing like the home Sarah and I had built. It was a fresh start, a blank canvas. It was just me. No shared memories, no ghosts lurking in the corners. It was lonely, yes, but it was also liberating. Life, slowly, painstakingly, began to take on a new shape. I still went to work, still saw Mark, still practiced photography. The initial raw pain of the betrayal had dulled to a persistent ache, a scar that would always be there. I thought about Sarah sometimes. About Michael, I wondered what had become of them. I never sought them out. I had to heal, and that meant moving forward, not looking back. One evening, nearly 2 years after that fateful morning, I was driving home from a late-night photo shoot. It was raining, the streets slick and reflective. I stopped at a red light and glanced idly at the car next to me. It was a red sports car, not exactly the same model as Michael's, but similar. Sleek, expensive looking. My heart gave a strange little lurch. The memory, sharp and sudden, of that red car in my spot, of the anger, the betrayal, the crushing, flashed through my mind. I felt a pang of something I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness, not anymore. It was a quiet, profound weariness. The memory was still there, a part of my story, a part of who I had become. But the intense emotional charge was gone. The light turned green. The red car pulled away, its engine purring. I watched it go. Then slowly, I drove on. It wasn't my fight anymore. It wasn't my problem. It was just a car. I had learned a lot in those 2 years. I learned about betrayal, about the depths of human pain, about the destructive power of anger, and the heavy price of vengeance. But I also learned about resilience, about picking up the pieces, even when you don't know how. About leaning on friends. About slowly, painstakingly rebuilding a life from the ground up. The heartbreak hadn't gone away. It was still there, a dull ache beneath the surface. But it wasn't consuming me anymore. It was no longer a fresh wound, but a scar, a reminder of what I had lost and what I had survived. I parked my own sensible sedan in my new assigned parking spot. It was a simple spot, no drama, no history. Just a place to park my car. It was small, but it was mine, and it was safe. As I walked into my quiet apartment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't the joy of a new beginning, not exactly. It was more like the quiet satisfaction of having survived a long, brutal war. The anger was gone. The need for vengeance had faded. All that was left was a quiet acceptance, and a slow, steady journey towards healing. My life was irrevocably changed by that one extreme act, by that one moment of desperate rage. It had cost me my marriage, a significant portion of my savings, and a piece of my innocence. But it had also shown me how strong I could be, how resilient the human spirit truly is, even when faced with absolute devastation. The road home had been long and winding, filled with pain and despair, but I was on it. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was finally heading in the right direction. The story of the crushed car, of the broken marriage, of the ultimate act of defiance, would always be a part of me. But it no longer defined me. I was simply John, a man who had lost everything, but who was slowly, surely finding his way back. And that, in itself, was a kind of heart-breaking victory.